everybody, and welcome to the Winging It podcast with myself, Nigel and Freddie. Coach, we've got another Formula E edition because we have had the first ever Gen 3 race in Mexico City, the first race of the season, and it was won by Jake Dennis, his fourth Formula E race win in his career. It was an intriguing day or weekend, if you include Friday practice, of course, and we're going to discuss all things about it, including how the race went. But Freddie, first of all, your impressions of the first event of the season. It was a bit, I don't know, it felt very first new era race kind of feel. Well, if those are the right words, but those are the words I'm using.
Yeah, I know what you mean. The sort of teething problems were there, but also the excitement of the future was there in the same breath. That was kind of the impression I got. I really enjoyed seeing the cars. My first impression watching the practice sessions was, granted, cold track, hard tyres doesn't help. Well, does help this, which is that they were able to sort of throw the cars a bit and they would swap a bit and you would see the motion of the driver in the car in a very definite way, which made them look a bit like a kart, which I enjoyed to watch. They don't race as well as the Gen 2, but you can still send them. My general impression was, intriguing. I really enjoyed the qualifying session. I think it's very, very rare to go into a qualifying session with no knowledge at all of what's going to happen, with only some predictions we'd made based on a very inconclusive, it seems, Valencia test and just from hangover of Gen 2. Going into a qualifying session with such a close field with no knowledge of what's going to happen. The first group A going into the duels was separated by under 600ths of a second, which if you look at Formula One, if we say there's a pole margin that's closer than 2/10, we get excited. So for this to have cars that are we considered to be back of the grid cars and cars that we consider to be front of the grid this close all over the place was very exciting to see. And I thought the duels format once again worked in leaps and bounds. The race was the slow burn of the race worked. I think the laps and the safety car added laps was interesting, and it did lend itself to a bit of conservatism from the strategy, which is understandable for energy saving. And I think the roadblock of Lucas de Grassi added and took away from the race in two ways, because his defensive drive meant that the faster cars that got past him were able to flee, whereas they, as opposed to being hunted down by other faster cars. Yeah. So his excellent drive, we'll talk about Lucas's excellent drive, and I'm absolutely certain
we will.
made and didn't make the race in the same way for me. So I don't think it's not the best Formula E race we've ever seen. It's not the best race in Mexico ever. But it sets a nice tone for Gen 3, in my opinion. It means that some tracks, particularly a fast Diriyah with a longer straight, will be very interesting. The sort of, they call it the toboggan run of Diriyah, the sort of, I don't know, something like 10, 15 corners just all in one go, sliding through on the dusty track. That's going to be very exciting in a Gen 3 car.
I can't remember the last time, or if ever, I felt there were so many questions in the air going into a motorsport weekend. I mean, me and you have watched so many motorsport series over the year outside of F1, toy cars, GTs, sports cars, everything. And I can't think of a time when we didn't know what was going to happen, what the race would be like, the pecking order. And really, that is kind of what we got. The pecking order that we saw in Valencia testing with the Maserati powertrains doing very well. Instead, it was Porsche who seemed to have the edge in Mexico, perhaps due to the altitude, because just like it's the same venues, F1, different
altitude won't really make a difference to an electric motor.
Did not think the heat somehow handle the temperature better though?
The temperature definitely will be interesting, but the temperature really more is about the battery. So it's how they accommodate the battery. And how
is it not a coincidence Porsche were strong last year, they were this year again in Mexico, and then the rest of the season last year they weren't that?
No, it probably isn't a coincidence, actually. Good point. There probably is something to that, but so it'd be interesting to see, because they were mind-blowingly efficient. Like the amount of pace, particularly Wehrlein and Dennis are able to show. And late in the race, Lotterer and Da Costa are able to push a lot more as well in the sister Porsche and the sister Andretti. So there is a lot to shout about in that regard, to be fair. I think you're right. We're going to have to see on that one because
absolutely.
Yeah, you're right. There is form for Porsche. They obviously got pole there in their first season as well with Lotterer. So
but I do think for this season the pecking order is going to change every single race pretty much, at least in the first half of the season. To me, it's going to be very different to last year. I think we're literally pretty much every team, I think, apart from Apps, Cupra, can get on the podium at some point. Even Neo could have a surprise podium or something because it is just so close, which you kind of expected. But those unknowns are still there, and that's going to take a while because I think the teams were very, very cautious. We saw, because usually with Formula E, we're used to very attacking and aggressive driving and strategy and perhaps even setup as well. But I think everyone was just, they wanted to almost reach the finish line, then points and the victories and the podium was almost a bonus. That's how I kind of saw the race. That's why it wasn't too exciting. Yes, the first half of the race was filled with safety car periods, but we definitely saw less action compared to Gen 2, which I hope was just a Mexico thing. Have you got any thoughts on that about what this would do? New norm in terms of overtaking and racing?
Mexico's always been a bit of a weird one in terms of overtakes for Formula E. We seem to have had two of the most dominant races there, three of the most dominant Formula E races there in the last three with also Jerome Amanos Rodriguez, when you've got Mitch Evans in season 6 just waltzing off. You've got Wehrlein and Lotterer just dominating in season 8, and now you've got Dennis just sending a lunge and walking into the distance 3 times after the safety car. So I think, it doesn't necessarily lend itself to being one you're able to overtake at so well. I think Grassi proved that when he was hunting Wehrlein for the whole afternoon in season 5 in the first Gen 2 race there, which has gone down in a bit of Formula E folklore because it was so tense, but it was tense because the overtaking was hard. There will be tracks where overtaking is just better because that's just the nature of Formula E, and I think the Mexico track doesn't necessarily lend itself as well to that, and I don't think that's a negative. I think because you were still able to throw the car into the corners and that little chicane around the back and work very well for that and cars were able to be driven in certain ways to then hunt down the other car. So there was pure racing there, and it was difficult racing, and it was racing you couldn't barge your way through, but you could send a dive bomb. So I think for analysing it from just this one race, there's potential.
We'll get onto the drivers and the incidents in a minute. Just attack mode, obviously we saw the new strategy with that. You could either use it for 2 minutes and 2 minutes again, or 3 minutes and 1 minute, 1 minute and 3 minutes, 4 minutes in total for all 3 strategies. It did seem a little bit less effective. Again, that could just be a Mexico thing, but we didn't see the pace difference in lap time or on the track in the race, I felt.
I think this will come with development. I think 4 minutes was not enough time to add anything, because when you've done 1 minute in a 1 minute 14, 15 lap, then it just means that you've got one overtaking opportunity, which you can't catch up back to because of with the attack mode advantage. So in the way that a 4 minute attack mode would allow you to fall back and then catch up and then overtake in one session, if your rival doesn't take it, it doesn't really have that effect because you can't use it for the full 4 minutes. So I wouldn't be surprised if, not necessarily the next 2 or 3 races, but mid-season onwards, they up it to sort of a 7 minute or an 8 minute allocation when you can do a 4 and a 4 or a 5 and a 3, that kind of thing. Maybe 6 minutes you can do 3 and 3 and or something like that. I wouldn't be surprised if it's ups to that.
Yeah, I agree. I think one thing we agreed on, Freddie touched on near the start, adding the laps on, that was a big plus, because if that was previous seasons where we had 45 minutes one lap, most of the race would have been under safety car, even with the added time on. So adding the 5 laps at the end, they could have. Well, I'm not sure the rule, but I felt like we could have found out a bit earlier. that they were added on those 5 laps, because we didn't know that it was 5. But
Yeah,
I
they
think,
only have
yeah,
they have a designated amount of time. I think whatever it is, something like 80% of the race where it can be under safety car, and then it will make a difference. So I think when that's over, then they announce. But I don't know if you can push that forward. I think it was something like 2/3 of the race in the 45-minute races. So yeah, maybe we could find out a bit sooner. But granted, it's part of the energy strategy. They don't want to give too much away.
Yeah.
And because it is quite good when they get cooked. And I think you saw that with quite a few conservative strategies, particularly from the front runners and the midfield, in sort of DS, Penske, and Dennis, who were able to sort of preserve quite a bit, and it worked, but they had a bit of spare energy at the end. Dennis did pull away over the last 2-3 laps a bit more because he was able to, but that's the game you've got to play, and they don't want to get burnt like they have been before. So I think they were conservative. I didn't think there would be 5 laps. If I was strategizing that, I would have thought there'd be 3 or 4, but there was a lot of safety cars. So I was impressed with it. I thought it worked nicely.
Absolutely. So some things worked, some things were kind of expected. There wasn't as much reliability issues, I think, as we thought there might be. It wasn't like there was half the field was dropping out. So I think it was cautious. It was an okay season opener. But yeah, like me and Freddie have touched on, it is going to change weekend on weekend, and the teams is going to massively improve in terms of development and finding the right setup, that kind of thing. But the person who did find the right ingredients on Saturday was Jake Dennis. I mean, absolutely dominant. It was reminiscent of his London win last year on the first day in London. I mean, once he got past Grassi, it was never in doubt, really, was it, Freddie?
No, it wasn't. When he was able to pull a gap so quickly, he was definitely able to waltz away with it, and he had complete control of that race. I think it was the fact that he was desperately in the fight for pole position with a flapping around front wing in that final duel says a lot about the pace of that weekend. And the pace of the Andretti Porsche was very, very strong, with Lotterer definitely showing good pace as well. Just didn't quite have the steel when he needed to, because he locked up in his qualifying duel against de Grassi, which otherwise it could have been very legitimately a front row for Andretti, and it could have been a fight between both of them, which would have, I think, been probably a really interesting race, because I think they both would have raced pretty hard, particularly seeing the way Lotterer was able to fight Hughes later on in the race. So I think there's they definitely did very well, that team, this weekend, and it would be interesting to see where that goes. Dennis did drive brilliantly, and it was a deserved win, very deserved win.
100%, yeah. Didn't put a foot wrong. Took advantage of that small mistake from de Grassi by going wide when he went wide at turn 1, then went for it straight at the next corner. And it's interesting because Dennis and Lotterer told me in Valencia that they were expected to be in the midfield, and so did Mahindra, actually, which is de Grassi's team. But then they ended up being front runners. Yes, de Grassi's efficiency wasn't that great, and that efficiency, or that poor efficiency, meant Pascal Wehrlein was able to get by. I think what we saw there with Wehrlein, his few seasons in Formula E, to be able to get the job done early, was Jake Hughes didn't, and was taking a few unusual lines, I thought, was Jake Hughes, and he never really got close at the right moments. We kind of saw the racecraft experience that you need in Formula E between Wehrlein and Hughes there. That's why Wehrlein came second, and Hughes ended up didn't get past the Grassi, and then Lotterer got him as well there, Freddie.
Yeah, Wehrlein and Porsche strategized themselves ahead of Hughes very nicely with their attack mode. They solved the dummy pretty nicely on that, and used a lot of good. They had that efficiency to use that pace to really hunt down in their attack mode phase and get ahead of Hughes, and use that efficiency again to get really close to de Grassi, because de Grassi needed to go really slowly through that sort of back end complex. It's double apex right-hander complex. He needed to go very slow there to regen, so he could pull away and keep essentially Hughes and Wehrlein at arm's length at the right points. But Wehrlein had that back pocket efficiency to throw it at him when he needed to. Wasn't quite there for the Nissan powertrain, and the McLaren didn't quite have that buffer of efficiency to what the Porsche had, but he definitely had a lot more, and definitely should have been able to get past. I think we can forgive him this one because there's so much to manage in a Formula E race. I think you're exactly right. The experience of Wehrlein, he's doing this for 4 seasons now and is familiar with that team. Hughes isn't familiar with the race situation in Formula E and isn't familiar with racing such, I mean, if you've got to do a definite overtake for a podium, I think bottom of your list for people you're going to want to overtake is Lucas de Grassi, maybe Sam Bird, and they're gonna defend, and he defended incredibly well. I thought Hughes did a mega job this weekend, though. I think his pace across just out the blocks was brilliant, and it was incredibly impressive to see him just hit the ground running and some.
Yeah, it kind of shows as well because he's been a sim driver for Mercedes, which is the McLaren team effectively now in terms of personnel. He can convert that onto the track from a sim driver, and that's why he's got this seat he's kind of showing him. Well, on de Grassi there, an absolute masterclass in defence. The way he took those lines in the turn 4-5 hairpin bit for the kink and hairpin was absolutely brilliant. Used the yellow flags to his advantage as well. Just all these things which happened so fast in the race car. He just managed it perfectly. And Hughes never really had a proper sniff or a chance, which I think just owes to what de Grassi did, because out of the Pelotada, the final corner, de Grassi always had a pretty sizable gap. So he found the power, found the right line, saved his energy in the right places. So brilliant drive from de Grassi. He's always in and around when there's stuff going on, and he kind of showed that there.
Yeah, he's one of those. He's canny. He's a very canny driver, and he's able to put his way through the little needles and can just get through what he needs to get through to get a result. And in his first race for Mahindra, it's not like he's in a powertrain he's used to. He drove a Mercedes with the Venturi, he drove an Audi, and for every other race he's done in Formula E, so he's not used to the Mahindra apart from a few days. And that car's new, and he's extracted the most from it against a teammate who normally extracts the most from anyone else, which is Roland. And the fact that he was in the fight for pole position, the fact that he was in the duels anyway, from the way that car operated in the race with efficiency was mad. I think there'll be a few more races this year where the Grassi is punching above his weight.
Sebastian Buemi was 6 in the Envision Jaguar, just behind that pack with Hughes, Lotto, de Grassi, Wehrlein. Probably slightly better than I expected the Envision team, because you'd normally expect the Jaguar factory team to be, but it seems like Envision just had that edge there this weekend. At Casti was 9th, the Mitch Evans was 8th, and Antonio Felix da Costa in 7th in between there. Is that what you kind of expected from the Jaguar powertrains, Freddie?
There wasn't really much to shout about going into it, and I think Evans did very well with his pace. I thought Buemi did very, very well with his pace, which was then both shown that by Casti that it was a hard line to walk. So I was very impressed.
Buemi's best race for a long, long time, actually.
I think he's
so often he was behind his teammate.
I think he's only had one race that's better than that or 2 races that are better than that in 2 seasons, I think. So it was a very, very, very good race for him. And hopefully can rejuvenate him in Formula E, because he is a force, and his Gen 1 and early Gen 2 performances aren't a joke. So I hope there's more to come from Jaguar, because they're normally pretty feisty as an operation. So are Envision. So hopefully with that car they can be fighting a bit more, and they were definitely there and definitely in that scrap for the podium. So it looks like they've got legs on the Mahindra. Maybe they'll be similar to the Nissan, who knows?
Yeah, potentially. And Mitch Evans, I noticed in the first attack mode, he missed it, or he didn't press the buttons at the right time, so he lost 2 or 3 seconds there, but even still, he probably only lost out 7th, maybe potentially 6th. But again, it is only the first race. They might come strong later in the season, which I think they will, actually, because we've seen how strong Jaguar are. They tend to go better on the, let's say, proper street tracks, where there's bumps and 90-degree turns, whereas Mexico's probably, would you say it's the smoothest track on the calendar, Mexico? probably.
Maybe Monaco, but
Oh yeah, Monaco. Yeah,
because you got the
so
weird little
they'll turn.
backtrack bits for Mexico.
Yeah,
So I think it's up there though.
yeah, definitely. Maserati though, big surprise because from testing they were the powertrain to beat. Stoffel Van Dorn was the best of them in 10th to get a point. And then they had Gunter Vern 11th and 12th, and then Mortara didn't finish because he looks like he dropped it quite frankly into one with a driver error, maybe pushing a bit too hard, trying to find some lap time. It, of course, it is only one race, but it just shows that I think from testing to this first race, it seems like every team has improved or every powertrain has improved apart from Maserati. That would be how I see it.
Yeah, the Stellantis cars didn't turn up really.
Yeah.
With DS Penske, as you say, and Maserati, they qualified badly, with 4 very good drivers. And you're right, Mortara dropped it, which wasn't his best moment.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think he would have got points anyway. He might have got one or two.
He might have
maybe.
got one. Who knows? It depends on the attrition ahead, and I think that's all that Jev and Van Dorn were able to rely on. And yeah, Maserati didn't look like they were as close as DS Penske, but DS Penske didn't look like, and they were able to operate efficiently at all. So who knows? It doesn't. It's so close. They were very close in lap times in the duels, and it's very easy to then get stuck behind an inefficient car. So there is a chance that there's more to come. Well, there's definitely more to come. It's not just a chance. So it's not a chance. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops because, like you say, Porsche have definitely found something in the 3 weeks since Valencia. Nissan look a lot better than they did as well. So
yeah,
I think it's quick. It's a quick run now. We've got 2 weeks off, and then we've got Diriyah, then we've got 2 weeks off, and then Cape Town, and then India is very close as well, and Sao Paulo. They're all that kind of run is quick and stretched out. They've got to go to a lot of places, so there's going to be a lot of sort of software work they've got to do very, very quickly, and it can be done. And the best way to learn is on track. So hopefully they'll be able to figure something out and be able to be. Who knows? Will it be cameo appearances at the front, or will it be definite? We don't know.
Yeah. And this is the thing with Diriyah, which is in 2 weeks' time, by the way, with it being a double header. If they are outside of the points or on the fringes of the points again, then obviously you can't really say it's championship over, but they're going to make it really difficult because that'll be 3 races where they're scoring not many points, quite frankly. So they've got to, at least on performance, show something in Diriyah, or else they're going to find themselves with quite a lot to do, because you would expect all 4 of those drivers, Van Dorn, Gunter, Vern, Mortara, to be championship contenders in terms of how good they are as drivers. So they can't leave themselves with too much to do, really. So that will be very interesting to see in 2 weeks. Other driver, Dan Tickton could have got, well, I think he would have probably got points, I think. Yeah, without those penalties. You got 2 penalties. 2 penalties at the end, didn't it? A drive-through and the oversped.
Penalty and a penalty for leaving the track and gaining an advantage. So we didn't see that.
We didn't see
what happened.
Yeah.
He was at the back, unfortunately, because he did do a mega qualifying, and the only thing that let him down was his duels allocation. I think if he'd been up against Buemi or De Grassi, he would have got through that, but he was up against Hughes, and Hughes did a mega job. So
yeah, absolutely.
I think there's a lot to come from that Neo car as well.
Yeah, much better than seasons. This could be one of the best seasons, best seasons Neo have had for a while in Formula E. Robin Freins has broken his wrist, unfortunately, in that incident he had at the chicane on the first lap of the race. It was a bit weird. That I don't know if it was his own fault or did someone break in the car and he couldn't brake. We're not too sure.
To me, it looked like he was just caught out by the stagnation ahead. I think it was a bit of a gap between him coming around that corner and the car ahead anyway. So he just took it normally. And unfortunately got caught out, went into the back of, I think Roland, was it?
Yeah.
Or Nato, might be Nato. And that just didn't didn't work, and he went up, and then it snapped on him, and it clearly snapped hard. So that's really a real shame. He's going to have surgery on that, and chances are he won't be in the car in Diriyah, at least, because that's 2 weeks away. Well, a week and a half away, because it's the Friday race as well, because of the weekend in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, good point.
So I don't know what apps have in place with that. Who knows if there's any replacement? It feels a bit sour to talk about it now, but yeah, sending best to Robin France, because that's pretty painful, particularly in the first lap.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's hope France is back in the car soon. Daniel Abt potentially could replace him. He hasn't driven in Formula E for a while, but that'll be he's almost like the Nico Hulkenberg of used to be in F1 in terms of super subs and Formula E, I think, this season. But yeah, hopefully Robin France is okay. So that was the race bit. There will be more exciting races guaranteed this season. That was, in Formula E terms, quite a low-key, typical first season new era race. And we're just going to finish off on some positive kind of news, although it is about for like negative reasons, I guess. The braking. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. I've been everywhere this week. The braking in Formula E, or there's been some crashes in Formula E before this weekend in testing, even before the official Valencia test. We did see one incident on Friday in Mexico when Mitch Evans, it wasn't seen on the TV cameras, but the systems shut down effectively, and this is allegedly because of there's a problem with the brakes. Formula E were going to bring in a secondary additional brake to the rear for failures like this, so then the drivers can stop in time and don't go head on into a wall like Evans unfortunately did, and luckily he was okay. This has been fast-tracked. This was announced just before the weekend. This has been fast-tracked to the next race in Diriyah in a couple of weeks' time. So this is great news, because we did not want to see more incidents like this. And thankfully, Evans's crash on Friday was the only crash of that nature where the car just wouldn't stop and he'd hit the barrier. So, yeah, very positive news, Freddie.
Very positive that nothing bad happened to Mitch, that he was able to continue in the race in the weekend to do then the race and everything. And very positive they've been able to fast track and, really get going on this break. I think it was very clear that it was a very serious issue, and they probably were quite conservative with their estimations of when they would be able to bring it in, but they've put their heads together and they've been able to apply that. One of the benefits of having a one make car, frankly, means they're able to do that, and they've got a bit of disposable money because the operating budgets are relatively small for a Formula E team. So Formula E as a holding has a good amount of time to sort of throw into this. So it's impressive they've been able to do that very quickly, and hopefully there aren't any complications going forward coming up to Diriyah with that.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And yeah, that was it for the first day or weekend of Formula E action.
Yeah, well, with 2 weeks to Diriyah, do you want to do any sort of preview, 5 minutes preview of Diriyah? What do you think is going to happen there?
Much higher speed track at night as well is the race. I think we're going to see better racing due to the nature of the track. I do think the pecking order will be different what way round. Anyone knows. So, yeah, I think it's just going to be a bit more exciting, because to me, in my opinion, Mexico was a bit tame. I think Diriyah will be much better in terms of the racing side. I think that's how I would see it.
Yeah, I think pretty similar. I think it will be interesting to see the cars on this track. It's a very, very cool track and just so odd and different. So it'll be interesting to see how they race there. And I agree. I don't think it will be as straightforward a pecking order as we saw at Mexico. Not even that not that Mexico was straightforward, but sort of the second half of the race was. I would be interested to see the continuity and the difference. Yeah,
and one last thing, the broadcasting to the addition of Oliver Askew to the commentary travel was very good, because normally it's Dario Franchitti. Dario Franchitti isn't doing all the races this season, but Oliver Askew filled his boots brilliantly.
He did. He did. They've got a few joining. They've got Nelson Piquet Jr. I think is going to be involved as well. So And Karun Chandok is obviously involved too.
Yeah.
And
I think he's doing more, a bit more.
Yeah, I think there's some very good additions there. And I think one thing, there were definitely teething issues on the direction, which is a bit odd. You did have a lot of sort of jumps around, and there was a point where Nikki Shields, bless her, was just ambushed by the broadcast. And there's a point in the qualifying where essentially they were just, every mic was open, they were just all talking over the commentators. And these are the things that you learn on the job. So yeah, unfortunately it did make it look a bit kind of uncomfortable. And granted, Formula E already has a slow burn to most of its races with the safety car that has more, but hopefully all of that will be ironed out very easily, because we feel like we have to protect Formula E, so hopefully they can do all of that well.
Yes, and we will protect Formula E as much as possible this year on the podcast. So there we go. Come back next time in a couple of weeks when we talk about Diriyah. I hope you enjoyed the Formula E race. I hope you enjoyed this Formula E podcast. You can find me at Nigel C. Journal on Twitter. I don't tweet anymore, neither does Freddie much. At FredCoates1999. A bit, yeah. Not as much as we used to, because we've got other things. And the podcast is
professionals.
Yeah, and the podcast is out at Winging It F1, where we will tweet this podcast, which you have already found because you are listening or watching.
But yes, if you want to listen to our F1 podcast, they'll be on the same channel, same platform. We have all audio platforms for podcasts. We have a YouTube channel where we have the podcast in video form, and you'll be able to find whatever you want in that regard. So on the move, on the static, you'll be fine. So please come back for more. We'd love it if you do, and love it if you subscribe, follow, leave a good review, because that really looks good for us and boosts our podcast.
Yes, and Adam Dickinson, our third, and well, not third in the pecking order, but our third colleague, will
our
be
co-host.
Our co-host. Why did I say that? Will be
our third colleague.
Our third colleague, yeah. And who's first and second? Anyway, Adam will be with us. Yeah, you probably are actually. Adam will be with us for the F1 podcast as well, which we'll have next week, maybe. There we go. Thanks for joining us. Hope you have a great week. We will see you next time.
Bye-bye.